So here we are. If you have followed along, I hope you have or will if you see this. We are now on book 3 of the Guardians of the Childhood of Guardians of Childhood. This one is Toothiana, the Tooth Fairy, queen of the Tooth Fairy armies. So we have met Mr. North, we have met Ombrick, we have met Catherine, we have met Bunnymund. I guess you understand who Bunnymund actually morphs into, right? With all of his egg-shaped things and so forth. So here you see, these are the guardians of childhood, the ones that we know all along. We're not quite sure who Ombrick's going to morph into. Got a pretty good idea of who North is going to morph into. I don't know if you know who Catherine is going to become as the stories progress. But at any rate, throughout the series, they are in battle with the Nightmare King. And here's some of the illustrations you see of people, various people. There's North and Nightlight. Of course, we know who Nightlight is, right? Catherine. Toothiana, one of her and these are other characters. There's the Nightmare King himself with the Fearlings. These are the villains. Gonna meet this guy here pretty soon. The Monkey King. What's this one? Oh yeah, and there's the Monkey Army, right? These are characters that are coming up in this book. All very interesting. Really. The imagination of William Joyce, I think, is phenomenal. The world that he has created to explain for us where our guardians come from. Chapter 1. Yeah. William, the absolute youngest, galloped through the enchanted village of Santoth Clausen on the back of a large warrior egg, a gift from E. Astor Bunnymund. I can't stop or I'll be scrambled, he shouted over his shoulder to his friend Fogg. In this new game of warrior egg tag, to be scrambled meant you had been caught up by the opposing egg team and therefore had lost a point. Sasha and her brother Petter were in hot pursuit, riding warrior eggs of their own. The matchstick thin legs of the mechanical eggs moved so fast they were a blur. Coming in for the scramble shot, Petter warned. His long tagpole with the egg-shaped tip was inches away from Sasha. Eat my yolk, Sasha said with a triumphant laugh. She pushed a button, and suddenly her warrior egg sprouted wings. She flew over the others, reaching the finish line first. William, the absolute youngest, slowed to a trot. Wings, he grumbled. They aren't even in the rules. I invented them yesterday, said Sasha. There's nothing in the rules that says you can't use them. Soon, Sasha was helping the youngest William construct his own set of egg-bot wings. She liked the youngest William. He always tried to act older, and she appreciated his determination and spirit. Petter and Fogg, feeling wild and industrious, catapulted themselves to the hollow of a tall tree where they had erected a hideout devoted to solving ancient mysteries such as why was there such a thing as bedtime? And what could they do to eliminate it forever? Across the clearing, in a tree house, perched high in the branches of Big Root, where everybody lives, right? Big Root that's surrounded by an enchanted forest that Olmbrick created. The tree at the center of the village, Big Root, their friend Catherine contentedly watched the children play. The air shimmered with their happy laughter. Many months had passed since the battle at the Earth's core, during which Pitch, the Nightmare King, had been soundly defeated by Catherine and the other guardians. The other guardians, Catherine and the other guardians. The wizard, his apprentice, Nicholas St. North, their friend Nightlight, and their newest ally, the Pukin rabbit known as Easter Bunnymund. Pitch, who had hungered for the dreams of innocent children and longed to replace them with nightmares, had vowed with his fearlings to make all the children of Earth live in terror. But since the great battle, he had not been seen or heard from, and Catherine was beginning to hope that Pitch had been vanquished forever. As for Catherine and her battle mates, their lives were forever changed. The man in the moon himself had given them the title of guardians. They were heroes now, sworn to protect the children of not just Santoff Clausen, but the entire planet. They had defeated Pitch, and their greatest challenge at present was how to manage the peace. The nightmare of Pitch's reign seemed to be over. The other children of the village now filled their days with mischief and magic. Bunnymund, who could burrow through the earth with astonishing speed, had created a series of tunnels for them, connecting the village with his home on Easter Island and with other amazing outposts around the world. And the children had become intrepid explorers. On any given day, they might journey to the African savannah to visit the lions, cheetahs, and hippopotami. Olmbrick had taught them a number of animal languages, so they had numerous stories to hear and tell. Many of the creatures had already heard of their amazing adventures. The children also regularly circled through Easter Island for the latest chocolate confection. Bunnymund had invented and could still hold back in time for dinner and games. Let me read that again. I think I got the rhythm of that wrong. The children also regularly circled through Easter Island for the latest chocolate confection Bunnymund had invented and could still be back in time for dinner and games with Bunnymund's mechanical egg comrades. The eggs were once Bunnymund's warriors. Now they helped the children build all manner of interesting contraptions, from intricate egg-shaped puzzles where every piece was egg-shaped, a nearly impossible and frankly unexplainable feat, to egg-shaped submarines. But no matter where the children roamed or what they did to occupy their days, whenever they returned to Santoff Clausen, it had never seemed so lovely to them. As Catherine sat in her treehouse, she put her arm around Kailash, her great Himalayan snow goose, and looked out on her beloved village. The forest that surrounded and protected Santoff Clausen had bloomed into a kind of eternal spring. The massive oaks and vines that had once formed an impenetrable wall against the outside world were thick with leaves of the deepest green. The huge, spear-sized thorns that had once covered the vines grew pliant and blossomed with sweet-scented flowers. Catherine loved the smell and drew a deep breath of it. In the distance, she could see Nicholas St. North walking with the ephemeral, beautiful, ephemeral. You know what ephemeral means, right? Spirit of the forest. She was more radiant now than ever before. Her gossamer robes were resplendent with blooms that shimmered like jewels. North was deep in conversation with her, so Catherine decided to investigate. She climbed onto Kailash's back and flew down into the clearing, just in time to see William, the absolute youngest, try out the new wings with which he'd outfitted his warrior egg. He landed and trotted over to her. There's Catherine. with Kailash. Want to race with us, Catherine? He asked. He gave Kailash a scratch on the neck, and the goose honked a hello. I will later, Catherine said, smiling. She waved to her friends and headed into the forest, realizing that it had been quite some time since any of the children had asked her to play, and even longer time since she had accepted. In joining the world of the Guardians, she was in a strange new phase of her life. She was neither child nor adult. As she watched the youngest William fly away with Sasha close behind him, she couldn't help but feel a bit torn. Then she heard North's hearty laugh, and underneath that, the more musical tones of the spirit of the forest. Catherine hurried toward them, thinking that it was hard to believe that when North first came to Santov Clausen with his band of outlaws, it had been with the intent to steal its treasures. The spirit of the forest, the village's last line of defense, had turned North's crew of cutthroats and bandits into stone statues, hideous, hunched elves, but she had spared North, for he alone among them was pure of heart. When Catherine caught up with the spirit and North, they were standing in that most strange, eerie part of the forest, the place where North's men stood frozen in time like stones in a forgotten burial site. With the spirit's help, North was bringing his bandits back to human form. Interesting, huh? As the spirit touched the head of each statue, North repeated the same spell, from flesh to stone and back again, to serve with honor your one true friend. From flesh to stone and back again, to serve with honor your one true friend. And one by one, they emerged from their frozen poses. To North's great amazement, they hadn't regained their size. They were still the same height as their stone selves, about 2 feet tall, with bulbous noses and high childlike voices. Welcome back, North called out, slapping each of the elfin men on the back. The men stamped their little feet and waved their little arms to get their blood flowing again, and soon the children, drawn by North's laughter, the children arrived. They were shocked. They often played among these small stone men, and now that they were moving, were alive in fact, the children were most intrigued. Tall William, the first son of old William, towered over them. Even the youngest William was overjoyed. At last, he was taller than someone. While the children watched and the little men kneeled before North, they took on new names as they pledged to follow their former outlaw leader in a new life of goodness. Gregor of the mighty Stink became Gregor of the mighty Smile. Sergi the Terrible was now Sergi the Giggler, and so on. It was an odd but auspicious moment, especially for North. He remembered his wild, unruly life as a bandit and the many dark deeds that he and these fellows had committed. He'd become a hero, a man of great learning, good humor, and some wisdom. So much had changed since that moment when he faced the temptation of the spirit of the forest, when he had rejected her promises of treasure and had chosen to save the children of Santov Clausen. So much had transpired. North turned and looked at young Catherine. He felt the full weight of all they had been through. They had both changed. It was a change he did not fully understand, but he knew he was glad for it. For though these dwarfish fellows in front of him had once been his comrades in crime, North in his heart had been alone. But that was past. This was a different day, and through the friendship he now knew, he could change bad men to good and stone back to flesh. North gently asked his old comrades to rise. They did so gladly. Peace had indeed come. Catherine took North's hand, and together they welcomed these baffled little men to the world of Santoff Closet. Chapter 2. The Guardians Gather. Although the children had begun to refer to the battle at the Earth's core as Pitch's last battle, the Guardians knew that the Nightmare King was both devious and shrewd. He could still be lurking somewhere, ready to pounce. Nightlight, the mysterious otherworldly boy who was Catherine's dearest friend, scoured the night sky for signs of Pitch's army. He even traveled deep into the cave where he'd been imprisoned in Pitch's icy heart for centuries. But all he found were memories of those dark times. Of Pitch and his fearing soldiers, he could not find even an echo. Bunnymund kept his rabbit ears tuned for ominous signs while burrowing his system of tunnels, and Ombrick cast his mind about for bits of dark magic that might be creeping into the world. As for North, he was being rather secretive. He kept to himself, or rather to his elfin friends, working quietly and diligently in the great study deep at the center of Big Root. On what he was working, no one knew for sure, but he seemed most intense. And every night the children clamored for Mr. Qwerty. I'm making a few little mistakes in this one. I don't know. Yeah, well, it's all part of being a granddad reading. Little slips of the tongue. This is Mr. Qwerty, the bookworm. He's the one who ate. He had been a glowworm, and he ate all of Ombrick's books of sorcery to keep them from Pitch the Nightmare King, and he became the bookworm, Mr. Qwerty. Contains all of Ombrick's books, all of them, and can display them at any time that he is asked. Every night the children clamored for Mr. Qwerty, the glowworm who had transformed himself into a magical book. Because he had eaten every book in Ombrick's library, he could tell the children any fact or story they wanted to hear. Mr. Qwerty's pages were blank, at least until he began to read himself, and then the words and drawings would appear. But most nights the children wanted to hear one of Catherine's stories from Mr. Qwerty, for he allowed only her to write in him. He allowed only Catherine to write in him. But before any story was read, Catherine asked them about their dreams. Not one had had a single nightmare since the great battle. There truly was absolutely no sign of Pitch. The sun seemed to shine brighter. Every day seemed more beautiful, perfect, and carefree. It was as if when Pitch vanished, he took all the evil in the world with him. Even so, the Guardians knew the wickedness of Pitch's magnitude did not surrender easily. They met together every day, never at an appointed time, but when it somehow seemed right. Their bond of friendship was so strong that it now connected them in heart and mind. Each could often sense what the others felt, and when it felt like the time to gather, they would just somehow know. They would drop what they were doing and go to Big Root, where, with cups of tea, they'd discuss any possible signs of Pitch's return. On this particular day, Nightlight hadn't far to travel. The night before, he'd stayed in Big Root's treetop all through the night, having searched every corner of the globe at dusk and found nothing alarming. Though he could fly forever and never slept, his habit was to watch over Catherine and Kailash. More and more often, the girl and her goose slept in their nest-like treehouse, and so Nightlight would join them and guard them till morning. Among the guardians, his and Catherine's bond was the greatest. It hovered in a lovely realm that was just went past words and descriptions. The two never tired of the other's company. and felt a pang of sadness when apart. But even that ache was somehow exquisite, for they knew that they would never be separated for long. Nightlight would never let that be so, nor would Catherine. Time and time again, they had managed a way to find each other, no matter how desperate the circumstances. So Nightlight felt most perfectly at peace when watching over Catherine as she slept. Sleep was a mystery to him. In some ways, so was dreaming. It worried him, in fact. Catherine was there, but not entirely. Her mind traveled to dreamlands where he could not follow. In his childish way, he longed to go with her, and on this night, he had found a way to trespass into the unknown realm of her sleeping mind. Chapter 3. Nightlight Must Lie. Now, as Nightlight shimmered his way into the waiting room of Big Root, he was the last to arrive. He kept his distance, perching high on one of the bookcases. Ombrick and Bunnymund were poring over a map of the lost city of Atlantis. Catherine spied Nightlight and could immediately tell that something was troubling him. North began regaling Ombrick with the news about his band of brigands and their new lives as elfin helpers. Ombrick's left eyebrow rose high. He was clearly amused. Well done, Nicholas. I see great things in store for your little men, he said. Though neither man would say out loud how they felt. Catherine could tell Ombrick was immensely proud of his apprentice, and North took great pleasure in Ombrick's approval. She felt a surge of happiness for the both of them. Bunnymund's ears twitched. These humans and their emotions, he thought, they're so odd. They're more interested in feelings than chocolate. Any signs of pitch today? He asked politely but pointedly. North shook his head. The old grump hasn't grumbled. None of the children have had bad dreams, reported Catherine. Nightlight didn't respond. He knew otherwise. Or at least he thought he did. Bunnymund then answered his own question. And nothing in my tunnels, nothing evil or unchocolatey or anti-egg anywhere. Ombrick stroked his beard. Perhaps the children are correct, he mused, and the battle at the Earth's core truly was Pitch's last battle. North pondered. Can that really be? Catherine turned to Nightlight. She generally knew what he was thinking, but today she couldn't read him. Nightlight, she prompted. Have you seen anything? He shifted on his perch. His brow furrowed, but he shook his head. It was the first time Nightlight had ever lied. Chapter 4. Celebration, an insect symphony, and a troublesome feeling. It's now been 8 months since we last saw Pitch. I think before we declare victory, it would be best to consult with the man in the moon, Ombrick said. And that means a journey to the lunar Lamadary, Bunnymund and North said together. The Lamadary sat on the highest peak of one of the highest Himalayan mountains, and it was there where North had first met both the lunar llamas and the man in the moon. North was ready to leave that minute. It was a great chance to meet again with the Yeti warriors who defended the city. They had been quite helpful when North had been learning the secrets of the magic sword the man in the moon had bestowed upon him. The sword was a relic from the Golden Age, and there were 5 of these relics in total. Bunnymund had one as well, the egg-shaped tip to his staff. The man in the moon had said that if all 5 were gathered together, they would create a force powerful enough to defeat Pitch forever. But peace seemed to be at hand. With any luck, the Guardians would have no need for more relics. But North had been wondering how he would keep his warrior skills sharp, or if he even should. With the Yetis, he'd again have able competitors with whom to practice his swordsmanship. Ombrick turned to Bunnymund. Didn't even have to ask about making a tunnel, because next to making chocolate eggs, digging tunnels was the Pooka's favorite pastime. One tunnel coming up, Bunnymund said. It'll be ready in 27 half yokes. That's 1 day in your human time. Outstanding, Ombrick said with a nod. We'll take the whole village. Everyone is welcome. He added, it'll be a great adventure. We'll plan a celebration tomorrow evening to see us off. Catherine clapped her hands together in excitement. Kailash will be so happy to see the other great snow geese, she thought. She'd wondered if her goose ever missed the flock of massive birds that nested in the lunar llama's mountain peak. But her excitement was tempered by her unease about Nightlight. She glanced at him, but he would not return her gaze. Instead, with his amazing speed, he shot out the window and into the clear blue sky. But he did not seem bright, Catherine noted, and her unease grew. The next day found Santa Claus in full of preparations for the trip and for a celebratory dinner. The egg bots whipped up frothy confections, and the ants, centipedes, and beetles tidied up Big Root, while glowworms set up tables in the clearing, tables that would be heaped with delicious foods. Not to be left out, squirrels made teetering piles of nuts. Birds filled their feeders with seeds, and mouth-watering smells came from every nook and cranny of the village. That evening, the children led a parade of humans, elfish men, insects, birds, and their great bear, the Ginny that Dorothy created. Now they have it back. North's Wonder Horse Petrov and one very tall Puka to the well-decorated hearing. So there's a parade. Let's go back and get that parade again. The children led the parade of humans, elfish men, insects, birds, their great bear, the genie, North's Wonder Horse Petrov, and one very tall Puka to the well-decorated clearing. The moon was so luminous that the villagers were sure they could see the man in the moon himself smiling down on them. The lunar moths glowed, and Ombrick's many owls hooted softly. Soon the children were jumping onto the backs of the village reindeer and racing them across the evening sky, while Catherine and Kailash flew alongside. Fireflies circled their heads, making halos of green-tinged light. Children on the backs of the reindeer flying through the sky. Catherine flying alongside them on her goose. And they have green-tinged halos of light. Isn't that sweet? Down below, North's elves ate plate after plate of jam, roly-poly, noodle pudding, and sweet potato schnitzel, topping off the meal with elderberry pie and Bunnymund's newest chocolates, a delectable blend of Aztec cocoa and purple plum. All the while asking North to describe the meals prepared by the Yetis, accomplished chefs, all at the lunar llamaberry. It seemed that being turned to stone and back again was a hungry business. Even the crickets came out into the moonlight to play sort of insect symphony to the delight of everyone. Finally, when all the games had been played, the food eaten, and the songs sung, the village of Santa Claus settled down to sleep. Up in her treehouse, however, Catherine lay awake. Nightlight had been the only one who had not joined the party that night, and it bothered her. This did something else. Ever since the last battle, Catherine found that in quiet moments like this, her mind often drifted back to Pitch and his daughter. the little girl he had fathered and loved before he'd been consumed by evil. In the final moments of their battle, Catherine had shown Pitch a locket that held his daughter's picture. She could not stop thinking about the anguished look on Pitch's face, or her own longing to be loved as deeply as Pitch's daughter had been loved by her father. Does that feeling only happen between parent and child, a father and a daughter? Catherine wondered. Does that feeling only happen between parent and child, a father and a daughter? Catherine wondered. She had lost her own parents when she was just a baby. It was true that here in Santa Claus many people loved her and cared for her. Ombrick and North were like a father and a brother to her. But that wasn't the same as a real family, was it? She couldn't help wondering whether anyone would feel that same anguish she'd seen in Pitch's eyes if she were lost to them. And there was nightlight. This is the locket that she'd shown to Pitch's daughter. And there was nightlight. She sensed his current melancholy. He's never had a parent, she thought, and he had seemed happy enough. But now something was wrong. She would find out what it was. She would make him happy once more, and then maybe she'd be happy too. That thought brought comfort to her. Catherine, the gray-eyed girl. And soon, like everyone else in the village, she was asleep. That thought, that she'd be able to make Nightlight happy again, that thought brought comfort to the gray-eyed girl. Soon, like everyone else in the village, she was asleep. But a strange wind blew through Santa Claus. It caused the limbs of Catherine's treehouse to gently sway. If Catherine had awakened, she'd have felt uneasy, as though she were being watched by a force nearly as ancient as Pitch. She's being watched by a force nearly as ancient as Pitch, whose motives and deeds would change everything. If Catherine had just opened her eyes, she'd have seen what was in store. A strange wind blew through Santa Claus while Catherine was sleeping, caused the limbs of Catherine's treehouse to gently sway. If Catherine had awakened, she'd have felt uneasy, as though she were being watched by a force nearly as ancient as Pitch, whose motives and deeds would change everything. If Catherine just opened her eyes, she'd have seen what was in store. Next time we will go on to chapter 5, titled An Amazing Journey to the Top of the World.